bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I do understand that some accommodations were made with the other side to allow me to speak at this time, and I very much appreciate that. I'm rising today to speak about Bill C-4, a bill that makes very substantial changes to our labour relations environment. But for the purposes of my speech today, I want to focus on one specific element of this bill, and that is the issue of the secret ballot. I believe in the importance of a secret ballot. And on first blush, it would seem perhaps odd that here we are in 2016 in the Canadian House of Commons with our long history of respecting freedom, human rights, the rule of law, democracy, and yet that it is necessary in 2016 to make arguments about the importance of a secret ballot. Frankly, we thought the argument on structural deficits had been won in the 1990s, but we thought the argument for the secret ballot had been won in the 19th century. And yet this government's actions force us to again make arguments which to many perhaps seem rather obvious about how appropriate, how essential allowing people to vote in private without someone else's scrutiny are. It is 2016, but I'll say, unlike our current Prime Minister, I have more to say in favor of social improvement than simply stating the current date. So I would like to give some background just perhaps about the certification process and then make some substantive arguments about the importance of having a secret ballot. So we have different systems for union certification. The context we're talking about the secret ballot in today is, of course, union certification. We favor a secret ballot. We favor the idea that people should be able to express their political views in privacy without scrutiny from other people. We think that's a good general principle of democracy. But in this particular case, at least, the government and our colleagues in the NDP think differently. They favor a card check system, which involves, of course, a certification process where people are asked to sign on in a sort of semi-public way. Someone goes and asks them to sign on. Those cards are collected, and then certification happens automatically based on that card check process. So this, in my view, very much resembles the sort of 19th century public balloting system and has many of the same problems. What are the substantive reasons why a secret ballot is important? Well, I'll start by talking about a right to privacy. People should have their right to privacy respected in matters of political opinion, you might say in matters of religious opinion as well. On these deeply important and for some people personal matters, people should have the right to not have to express their opinions in public. Of course, many people choose to talk publicly about their political perspective. Nobody has any doubt how I voted in the last election. But just because some people wish to be public, it doesn't mean that others who wish to be more private shouldn't in fact have a right to do so. And we understand, we respect a right to privacy in these cases because without that privacy respected, many people would not have the ability to do so with confidence that there wouldn't be some discomfort to them or some negative consequences. You know, I was recently in India, Mr. Speaker, talking about some human rights issues there, and one of the issues in India is that a number of states have laws that require people who want to change their religion to declare so publicly and have the state review the process by which they came to that decision. And many in India, many outside have concerns about this precisely because of the fact that someone's deeply held opinions, they should be able to keep those opinions private. The argument was made in response, though, well, if someone is confident in their own perspective, why shouldn't they be willing to declare it publicly? But we obviously understand that on these sensitive matters, and that includes when it comes to opinions about unions, union certification, people should have a right to have the privacy of their opinions respected. And a secret ballot effectively ensures that. The second argument that I'll make in defense of the secret ballot is that secret ballots protect people from reprisals and also help to avoid corruption. And here I think it's important to visit some of the history around how the secret ballot originally developed. In 1867, in the UK, the Second Reform Act was passed, called the Representation of the People Act. And this enfranchised a greater number of skilled workers. But this made the need for a secret ballot particularly urgent because there was a concern that tradespeople would be the subject of undue and inappropriate pressure by their employers in the case of a public ballot. That if, as the traditional public ballot system was, people had to go to the town square and declare who they were supporting in an election, that this, for those who were skilled workers who were working for other people in trades and other areas, that they might be subject to significant pressure from the employers. And this added to the concern as well that the tenant class, people who were working other people's land, might be the subject of eviction or threats of eviction if they voted against the interests or the desires of those who owned the land on which they lived. The public ballot was a way, in fact, of forcing people to not be able to exercise their political franchise in a way that was consistent with their interests because they were subject to threats of economic coercion and other forms of intimidation. What's important about this history is that bringing in the secret ballot was an essential reform to protect the rights of working people, to protect the rights of lower income people in the UK at the time of the Second Reform Act. And yet, perversely, we have political parties in this House today who claim to advocate for those working men and women who don't actually understand how important the secret ballot was and continues to be for protecting their ability to express their opinion. There was real fear of reprisals at the time, and of course that has echoes in our debates today about the fear that people who are forced to vote in a public ballot may be subject to undue pressure and intimidation. That pressure could come from either side. In particular, though, in a card check system, that intimidation, undue pressure, could come from those who are seeking to sign people up. People should, regardless of your opinion on certification in a particular case, working men and women should be free to come to their own conclusions and to express their opinions privately without fear of reprisal. Of course, another issue at the time the secret ballot was introduced was concern about corruption. If people are voting publicly, it's much easier to offer inappropriate inducements to buy votes, perhaps, when you can actually check to see if they voted as they were paid to do so. The secret ballot, although it doesn't fully eliminate corruption, it helps to ensure that sort of thing doesn't happen because there's no way to effectively see if the vote that was bought was actually paid. So protection against reprisals and corruption were very important for bringing in secret ballots, and they're important today for ensuring that secret ballots continue to exist in all environments. The third point I'll make in defense of the secret ballot, Mr. Speaker, is just the importance of a vote being preceded by a process of deliberation in which people can hear arguments from both sides. Both sides should have an opportunity to present arguments in favor of or against a particular proposition, in this case, certification, before the date on which a vote takes place. Now, of course, the card check system does not allow that deliberation to happen. The card check system means that the certification process could have gone all the way through in terms of getting all those signatures before people who have a different opinion are even aware that that process is happening. It undermines this principle that there should be meaningful discussion and debate on both sides. Now, the government seems to understand this principle on some issues. Although imperfectly, we certainly disagree with their reluctance to have a referendum when it comes to electoral reform. But we hear them make the argument with respect to the electoral reform that before any kind of hypothetical vote takes place, it's important for there to be a long discussion about the different options and the pros and cons. But why don't they believe that in the case of certification? Surely the secret ballot at a specific time provides an opportunity for there to be robust debate within a group of workers about whether or not certification in general and whether or not certification with a particular union is a good idea. Again, Mr. Speaker, I'll just say many people might be surprised watching this debate today that it is necessary to make arguments in this House in favor of a secret ballot, that two of the three major parties in this House oppose giving working men and women a secret ballot on something as essential as union certification. But we need to make those arguments because the government and the NDP just don't seem to understand how truly foundational, how important this is, how consistent this is with a right to privacy, how a secret ballot protects against reprisals and corruption, and how a secret ballot helps ensure that a vote is preceded by a process of meaningful deliberation. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Questions and comments? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think what the Conservatives have really failed to understand is the importance between labour and management and relationships and harmony within the workforce, and how much healthier it is when government works with organised labour and business to make sure that there is that harmony that takes place. The member needs to recognize that this legislation that we have today that we're debating is to rectify a wrong when the government brought in two private members' bills without going through a process that allowed for that harmony to continue. My question to the member is that there are many individuals and groups that really believe in the value of organized labour and how it has contributed so much to Canadian society over the years, and it does have a role to play, a fabulous role to play into the future. My question specific for the member is why does he feel that the Conservative Party tends to want to use labour legislation as a wedge issue as opposed to recognizing the true value of having harmony within our workforce?
Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, it's evident when we have this discussion about these issues that the Liberals want to speak in broad strokes about harmony, about the value of organized labor, and these are things that we agree with on this side of the House. We agree with the importance of harmony. We believe that organized labor has value, but the member did not address, and most of the speeches I've heard from the side opposite do not address the specific provisions in the bill. Yes, it's all well and good to talk about these nice words like harmony and working together, but let's talk about what is actually in the bill, because this bill takes away the assurance of a secret ballot. It takes away the assurance that working men and women can vote in the privacy of a secret ballot and not be subject to undue pressure that is associated with a public ballot. So I wish the members, instead of just relying on nice words, would actually look at the substance of the bill and consider the arguments that have been made.
Questions and comments? The member for Regina Louvain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, for a very eloquent speech and a very interesting history lesson. It's great to have a fellow alumnus of the Canadian University Society for Intercollegiate Debate in this House. And I would ask the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, given his enthusiasm for secret ballots, whether he would support a system whereby we have votes in every Canadian workplace periodically on whether the employees want a union. Because it seems that the Conservatives' supposed concern for workplace democracy only starts after employees have indicated that they want a union by signing membership cards. Now, the member suggests that this period of deliberation between signing cards and the vote is a good opportunity for debate and deliberation, but would he not acknowledge the fact that whereas unions have essentially no access to the employees that they're trying to organize, the employer has continual access to those employees during work hours. The employer has authority over those workers, and that creates a massive imbalance during this period of hoped-for deliberation. Thank you.
For Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member who is indeed an alumnus of the Canadian University Society for Intercollegiate Debate along with me. I understand the Prime Minister was part of that society at one time as well, but he dropped out after the society could no longer afford his speaking fees. Now, I want to... I want to respond to his question, though, in terms of a potential imbalance. Of course, employers have regular access to employees, and employees have regular access to each other. And both of these are different dynamics in a certification discussion. That's why we think, though, that a secret ballot makes sense. You could imagine pressure exerted by an employer. You could imagine cases in which pressure is exerted by fellow employees as well. You can imagine cases where an employee is reluctant to express their opposition to a union because if certification happened anyways, then they would, in some sense, their situation would be significantly affected by the union. So I say, why not a secret ballot? Now, he talks about why not have regular secret ballots. Well, I mean, if the state were to say that we have to have votes on certification on a regular basis in every workplace, where even if there hadn't been any kind of expression of interest. I mean, I think that's relatively impractical. We would have to agree. Let's let workers express interest, and then let's have a secret ballot in cases where that happens. That seems like the most reasonable, practical way to proceed.